The journey we're taking is the journey within you. Everybody has their own story and their own journey to share. Every journey conceals another journey within its lines, the path not taken and the forgotten angle. The journey within you, where you will listen to stories from others sharing their triumphs and struggles that led them to where they are today. Welcome to the journey within you. Today, I have a special guest, April Tanner. And I think my first connection with that and her is Tanner. That was my maiden name. And so we've got to find out if there any way possible that we might be related. That came and I was just like, oh my gosh, I've got to get to know this person. And then when I moved to Rome, I started friending people because I'm not from the area and I wanted just to get to know people in my community. And I have truly enjoyed getting to know you and your family, April. And through this, I would love, I've seen the journey that you've been on just recently. And so I thought this is something that we need to share with our community and we need to share with our listeners, because right now in this moment, there's somebody probably just starting that journey. And so you can give insight, you can give some of the struggles, maybe some of the wins, because I know there's been some great wins coming your way on this, but just give a little glimpse into you and who you are, April, and then lead us to where this journey has brought you to today.
Okay, well, we'll start. I know you said start with where I was born and everything. I am from here. I'm from Aragon, Georgia. I was born in Floyd County in 1978. Lived here my whole life. I actually lived right down the hill from my parents. When Jason and I were married, they gave us family land.
Oh, how sweet.
And so we were able to build on their land. So that's been a blessing, just having them right up the hill from us, since the kids were born and all that. But I've lived in two houses my whole life. I started out on Taylorsville Road until my parents built the house there or when I was growing up. But I went to Midway and then Pepperell Middle and Pepperell High School. Played sports. My dad was always, mine and my sister's biggest cheerleader coach. He was always right there with us, coaching us and cheering us on. I've always told people my dad didn't raise no girls.
Yeah. He got you in a sport.
Made sure we were tough and rough and competitive. I tell people all the time, it's like, I don't do it unless I can win it.
Oh, he gave you that winning. I like that.
Yes. So, and he's still, him and my mom both are, biggest cheerleaders. But I met Jason. I was 16 when I met him. He's a huge Mustang fan, and I've said my whole life, or our whole marriage, and since we met, I've always said, if a Mustang had not been my first vehicle, we probably would have never met.
Oh, I love it. That's fun.
Well, that's what. Yeah, he was out with a friend one night and saw me at a red light when it was Kmart, Gold's Gym. I was working at Gold's Gym.
Yeah.
I was at the red light right there, and he said he saw the car and wanted to, was checking out the car. He says he saw the girl. But he was in the car with a friend. And he was like, oh my gosh, I've seen her. He's like, she works at Gold's Gym. I've seen her going in there. And he's like, I really want to meet her. And so the guy he was with told him, he was like, well, that's Matthew's best friend. And so Matthew lived next door to Jason. And he was like, take me to Matthew now.
Yeah.
And
I got to meet her.
Yes. So the rest is history. But that's what I've told him all along. I was like, hey, Dad, I've not been in a Mustang. You would have never been interested.
I love it. That's a sweet story right here at Valentine's too. Love stories are not so much anymore. You love to hear the ones that, especially being 16,
Right.
And how long do you guys date before you decided to get married?
We dated for 5 years.
Wow.
Our first date was actually May 20th, 1995. So just, it was the last month of my junior year in high school. He had graduated in 93. So, he was 19. Yeah, he was 19. And so we dated my whole senior year, and then, which he had told me about 3 months into dating that he was like, okay, you're the girl I'm going to marry.
Oh, he knew. Yeah, he
He
knew.
knew. And, but yeah, I mean, we just, we had a great relationship. He proposed to me. It was December of 96. I graduated the next year in 96. So he
Mm-hmm.
proposed December of 96.
Mm.
Um, I graduated from hygiene school from the Medical College of Georgia
Mm-hmm.
in 99. So I worked for a year, and it just so happened that um, May 20th of 2000 fell on a Saturday. So we actually got married on our
On
5-year
your
anniversary.
day. Oh, that's
Yes,
precious.
of our
Yeah.
first date.
That's awesome. That's good. So you can celebrate both in one day.
Yes, and
Yeah.
we can't forget either of them. So it's like
Right,
we
right.
know them both.
Yes.
Um,
So did you have a home right away to go into, or where did y'all live to start out?
um, we lived off Preacher Smith Road in some apartments
Mm-hmm.
for about, let's see, he moved into them about 6 months before we got
To
married.
get established. Yeah.
Yes. And so then I moved in after we got married in May, and we bought our first house in August of that same year.
Wow,
I
that's
didn't do
good.
very, yeah, I didn't do very well in an apartment. I had
Yeah.
always
Been in
lived
a
in
home.
and it'd been in a home, and I was just like, I felt like I was on vacation, or so I was like, we've got to find something. He's like,
Yeah,
well, let's look.
it didn't feel permanent. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And then
So,
how soon, but when you started having children?
okay, so let's see, Kate was born in March of 2002.
Mm-hmm.
And I laugh about that story too, because when Jason and I started talking about having kids, I was like, let's start a family. Let's start. And he was like, well, are we ready? And so finally he told me one day, he says, I tell you what, he says, you let me build a detached garage, I'll let you have a baby.
Oh my
I was
goodness,
like,
I love it.
yeah, it's like, okay,
They gotta have
deal,
their
let's do it.
garages, don't they? They gotta have
Yes,
their garages.
they have to have them.
Mine was if I can build the garage, you can have an in-ground pool. Because we were past the
See,
baby stage thing, so
there you go.
that wasn't gonna happen.
Well, yeah, so I laugh now because it's like we have our 3 kids and he still doesn't have his detached
No
garage.
way. That's funny. He didn't get
So
it. Oh gosh, you need to get him his garage.
he
He's
needs to
earned
get the
it.
garage.
He's earned it.
He has definitely earned it. He's
Yes, he
like,
has. Oh my
I gave you
goodness.
3 kids. Where's my garage?
Exactly.
Go get
Oh,
it.
poor fella. So, you finished school and you were working as a hygienist. Is that right? Am I saying that right?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm a pediatric dental hygienist.
Oh, awesome.
So
And what does your husband do?
he is a sales supervisor for Coke
Oh, okay.
in Rome. So
Okay. Awesome.
he's worked in the like beverage
Mm-hmm.
sales
Mm-hmm.
industry since he was 19. So
So it's in a
he's been at
long time.
he's been at several different distributors. He started out with Simpson Grocery, which was a Budweiser distributor. Then he
Mm-hmm.
went to Mayfield, and now he's with Coke. So
So as you were growing your family, were you involved in church or was Jesus a part of your guys' lives at that time?
absolutely.
Absolutely.
I've been in church, since I was born.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember, growing up, my parents, I would have friends and stuff that, if they were out late, like prom or whatever, and, on Sunday morning, they weren't at church. And I'm like, just let me sleep in. They're like, nope, it was
Nope, you got to get up.
your decision to stay out late. You're going
Exactly.
to church.
Eh.
You live in this house, we go to church.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I've been in church my whole life. We're at Flint Hill. That's where I've been my whole life. Been there
Oh,
for, and Jason started at Flint Hill when we started dating. So he's
it's
been there
become a
for,
part of his life too.
yes, yes.
And
So,
then your children.
and yes, our kids have grown up in church. They've, um, basically, we've been there when the doors are open. God has always been a big part of our life.
Mm.
Or we felt like he was, but through the series of events and everything that's going on, we
Mm-hmm.
realized he was there, but we kind of had
Yeah.
him in the
In
passenger
the
seat,
back.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
or
We do
yeah,
that
even the back
sometimes.
seat. And yeah, when life is going great, it's
Mm-hmm.
okay, thank you. Now we're gonna
Mm-hmm.
do our thing, and yeah, we're gonna go to church on Sunday and Wednesday, and then
Yeah. And
let's
then when
do our
life
thing
takes
for
a
the rest of the
turn,
week.
mm-hmm,
Yes, absolutely.
it
And
changes
when
everything.
And when you have kids, you know, you look at other situations and things people are going through, and it's like, well, my stars, if that was my kid, this is what I would do. They wouldn't
Yeah.
be doing that. I'd take their
Yeah.
car. I'd do this. I'd do that. And, you know exactly what you're doing right where they're going wrong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then you have kids and,
That
you
all
know, they
changes,
try their
doesn't it?
stupid stuff. And it's like, oh, well, how do I fix this? You know,
Right. Right.
Cade had been struggling for a while before his accident. Um, he, since he was 2 years old, I'm telling you, I mean, when you could just tell there was a calling on
Mm-hmm.
his life.
Mm-hmm.
That child, he was so spiritual. At 2, 3 years old, he could outpray a grown man. I mean, he
Wow.
was just, I can remember he started out at Unity Christian School, and his pre-K teacher being like, oh my gosh, this child,
He's gifted. Yeah.
he's gifted. He loves Jesus. You know, he's, and he did for so long. And then, you know, high school and everything started, and he just made an abrupt turn, and was running so hard and so fast that,
Again, away.
yes, and we would tell him, and he was like, you know, he didn't want to
He didn't want to
go
hear
to
it.
church. He would take, you know, shifts just so he didn't have to be there,
Oh my
and you know,
goodness.
and he would tell us, he would be like, you know, everybody at church is judging me. Everybody, you know, nobody likes me there. They don't want me there. Everybody's judging me, and I would try to explain to him, like, hey, no, that's not the case. It's you. This
Yeah.
is you. It's your conviction. You're the one that's running. You're the one that's going out and drinking on the weekends. You're the one doing this stuff that you know without a
It's
shadow of
not
a
a
doubt
part
is
of your
wrong.
life. Yeah.
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 And you are being convicted. You are the one that feels like you don't belong. Everybody there loves you, and they want you back where you should be. And he just, you know, he wasn't having it. He
He
didn't
kept
believe it.
running.
He kept running. Um,
I think when we're in the midst of our sins, we blame everybody else. We're not going to see what
Absolutely.
we're doing. We're not doing anything wrong. What do you mean? This is, this is what I do
He's
right now.
he's doing what everybody else does. He's having
Exactly.
fun with
I'm
his
having
friends. He's
fun.
not
Yeah.
hurting anybody.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and his thing, you know, and he would come to us, and it's like, how do we know that the God we serve is real? Because I have friends who, you know, believe this, that, and the other, and that's how they were raised, and they believe it as strongly as y'all believe this. So how do we know?
How do we know which one's real? Yeah.
Right. And it's
Yeah.
like, well,
I have one questioning that now, and I'm like, you have to get in his word and you
yeah,
have to
and
read because he's the only one that's going to tell you and show you how real he
right.
is.
And it's hard when you're running and you don't want to believe it anymore. It's hard to. He didn't want to read. He didn't want to get in his word. He didn't want to go to church so that he could be proved that, oh yes, this is, you know, this is God.
Legit. His mind was cloudy,
Yes, absolutely.
very filled.
And you know, the way we believe what he was doing, he couldn't do. So
Yeah.
why would he want to try that?
That made a lot of tension in the home, I'm sure.
Right. Yeah, it did. You know, there was a lot of conflict between all of us because this isn't what we were doing. We knew he was sneaking out at night, you know, and we would, yeah, and I told him 15 million times, I was like, Cade, if I don't know where you're going to be dead in a ditch somewhere, and you're not going to know. He's like, Mom, I'm fine. Nothing happened. I'm like, no, nothing happened this time.
Yet.
And
Yeah.
it was over and over and over. It's like, yeah, nothing happened this time. Nothing happened this time. And he'll look at you right now. He's like, and nothing did happen until it did.
Right.
And when it did, it happened big, and it rocked all of our worlds.
And when did that, when was that call? Take me back to that moment when the phone rang.
So that was January 24th of 2021. I guess January 23rd, because it was 3:00 in the morning. So Jason and I had come upstairs. Cade was on the PlayStation doing a little PlayStation game with several of his friends. They were all, you know, online. And so I came up here and, you know, told him and his brothers, good night, we love you. And Jason and I went on to bed. So my phone rang at like 3:00 in the morning, and I looked over and I was like, who on earth is calling me at 3:00 in the morning? And I kind of moved the phone over and I was like, wait a minute, that's a Cedartown number. And anyway, and I was like, and it's 3:00 in the morning, and I was like, I don't have a clue why anybody's calling me because everybody's at home in bed.
Everybody's in bed. Yeah.
So I answered the phone, and it was like, Miss April. I was like, yeah, and he's like, this is Dayton, and he said, have you heard about Cade yet? And I about threw my phone across the room because
Mm-hmm.
I've had people calling me for, you know,
Yeah.
months and months and months. Do you know what Cade's doing? Do you know what Cade's
Right.
doing?
Right.
And just as I was about to let whoever this was on the phone
Yeah.
know, I know what Cade's doing. We are working with it. We're trying to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you calling me at 3 o'clock in the morning to tell me this?
Mm-hmm.
This could wait till
Yeah. Wait
10
till.
o'clock.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, he said Cade's been in an accident and he's critical.
Mm.
And I was like, excuse me, what? And I jumped up out of bed, and Jason jumped up on the other side because I guess he,
He could see.
as quickly as
Yeah.
I got up, and I just looked at Jason and I said, see if his Jeep's outside. So Jason took off outside and came back around the corner. He said, no, it's gone.
Mm.
And I was like, and right as I was fixing to ask him what he was talking about, Floyd Hospital started beeping
Started
in.
calling you.
So I told this little guy on the phone, I was like, you hold on, my other line's ringing. Don't you hang up.
Yeah.
And so I clicked over, and it was Floyd asking, are you Kate's mother? And I was like, or Aaron at this time,
Yeah.
Yes, this is she. And she said, we've got him at the hospital. We need you to get here fast, but don't speed. And I'm like, seriously, fast, but don't speed.
Yeah.
How do you
Right.
figure this
We're
out?
going to go so fast that we don't even know what happened.
Exactly. So at this time, I'm running out to the car I ran upstairs to tell his brothers we're leaving. And I'm calling my parents because, again, they're right up the hill to say, I was like, Kate's been in an accident. We don't know what's going on. All they told us is to get there fast. I was like, and Caleb, I said, and we know he's critical. That's all we know. So I told Caleb woke up. So I told him, and, so I told my parents, I was like, I'm leaving the boys at home because, we're in the middle of COVID and nobody can go in anywhere.
Oh,
We
my
don't even know
goodness.
what they're going to let us do once we get there. So like I said, I called my parents and we took off. And I swear, I've told people, Jason had to change clothes. I went in my pajamas, and I was like, I was, ranting and raving because he was taking so long
Right.
to
Don't
get
get dressed.
ready.
Let's
And
just
I was
go.
like,
Yeah.
why do you need to get dressed? I'm
Yeah.
going in my pajamas. Just grab your stuff. And I was so mad because I swear it took him 20 minutes to get
That's
dressed.
what it felt like, I'm sure.
It did.
Yeah.
But from the time my phone rang till we got in back to the hospital to see Cade, it had been 31 minutes. So apparently it didn't take him
Didn't
that long
take
to get
very
dressed.
long. No.
Yeah, because
Oh.
it's a 20-minute drive from here to Floyd Hospital. So I was like, okay, apparently it didn't take long. And that was from the friend's phone call till we got back. So when we got to the hospital, Jason just dropped me off at the door and went to park. And, to just get back to him. So I took off to get to Cade. And, when I walked into the room, he looked at me and he just said, Mom, I'm sorry. And so I'm just like, my heart, I was like, he's alive. He's okay. He's talking to me.
He talked to you. Yeah.
Yeah. And then his next sentence brought me to my knees. And it was, I can't move.
He knew it.
Yeah, he did. And I still have flashbacks to the end. There's been times I've had to pull my car over driving down the road
When he said those words to you.
because of those words. And I think a lot of times it's because I couldn't drop to my knees. I just looked at him and I was like, what do you mean you can't move? He said, I can't move. I said, your legs? And he says, nothing. And so I looked at the nurses behind him and I was like, why can't he move? And so that's when they went to explain to me, he's broke his neck. Dr. Cowan was waiting for y'all to get here to take him into surgery. So Dr. Cowan was in the OR waiting on him. And so about that time, Jason came in behind us. And so they let us both back. But I was sitting there asking the nurses all these questions. I was like, well, who was he with? Where was he at? And I'm just, who was driving? And one of the nurses, I heard her looking at it, she's like, man, he can answer all your questions. We can't answer any of them because they couldn't tell us anything because of HIPAA.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, yeah, he's talking to me.
Right. But you wanted it instantly. And, I understand that.
Right.
Yeah.
So, he was able to tell me that he wasn't driving, that, who he was with. And then, of course, I found out that one of the friends was our next door neighbor and, our preacher of 42 years, grandson.
Mm.
So a very close friend. And, I'm looking at the nurses saying, how is he? And they would just shake their heads no.
Mm.
And turns out he was actually had a severe head injury and was in a coma at the time, and they were waiting for him to be life flighted.
Mm.
But then Cade was actually taken into surgery. The accident happened around 2:00 in the morning, and he was in surgery by 3:45, which was a miracle in itself for him to have been from injury to surgery that quickly.
Mm-hmm.
It typically just doesn't, happen that quick.
Not usually.
So, and since then, I've talked to the anesthesiologist. I've, heard from him since then, and he said, the first that Cade had looked at him and asked him, he says, will I ever walk again? And, he told him, he's like, son, he said, I don't know. He said, Dr. Cowan's going to do what he can do, and we'll go from there. And his next question to him was, am I going to live?
Mm.
And the anesthesiologist, he looked at him and he said, son, he says, I'm going to do my part. The rest is up to God.
Mm. Mm.
And he told a couple of my friends that he works in surgery with, he says, those are the words. He says, those words haunt me. He said, he changed my life. He said, there's, cases that you work and stuff and, that you'll never forget.
Right.
He says,
he's one of those.
He says, I'll never forget, his
looking him in
fear
the eyes.
in his eyes before he went to sleep. He said, but he says, I don't know, that's going to be up to God. He said, and I put him to sleep. He said, I didn't give him a chance for another question.
Right. He didn't want to have to not answer, right?
Yes,
gosh.
Yeah, he was done.
And it's amazing how in tune he was. I mean, that just blows my mind that he was so there.
And it was, I think God knew. He knows what you need and what you can handle, and he knew that we needed him to be that alert at that time, I think.
Right, where you could hear his voice.
Right. Dr. Cowan, after he did the surgery, he came out and told us, he was like, everything went well. We've got everything fixed. We're taking him up to the ICU. And he said, we're going to go from there. He says there could, the swelling could go up high enough that he has to go back on the ventilator. But right now he's breathing on his own.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just, okay, well, this is great. Well, how long do you think he'll be in ICU? Like, day or two, when do we get started on therapy is, And he says, we're going to play it by ear. We'll see how it goes. He said, and we're going to work on getting him into a rehab hospital. But so Jason and I went up. It was right at 7:00 in the morning when we got up to the ICU to Cade, and he was awake. He was talking to us. And I remember I looked at the nurse, and I didn't realize this until a little bit later, but my parents didn't stay at home with Caleb and Kason. They were in the parking lot of Floyd Hospital.
Oh, my goodness.
And had been there since we had been. They apparently tailed us in. So I told them, I was like, my parents have been out in the hospital, out in the parking lot since 3:30 this morning. I was like, is there any way that they could just stick their heads in here just to say hello, just to see him, just so they can see that he's,
is
that
alive.
He's okay. Yeah. And the nurse looked at me and she said, I tell you what, she said, anybody that you want to see him, that needs to see him, get them here now. And in my brain, and where my brain was allowing me to go, was, oh, well, how nice. They're, while she's here at shift change, they're going to let him in real quick to see him.
Right.
As my parents came in, somebody had said something, I called them, they said, you can come in. Well, they said, as they walked by, somebody was fixing to stop them, and the other person who was standing there working said, no, let them go by. This may be their last chance. And so since then, also, we have talked to several, nurses and staff and stuff that was at the hospital. And we had found out since then that they honestly didn't expect him
to make it,
to ever leave. which, so that morning, you know, all of his grandparents got to come in and see him, and my sister and Jason's sister were able to come in and see him. And then the staff at Floyd they looked at me and Jason, said, he's 18 years old. We know technically he's an adult, but he's your child. He's your baby. Keep this door closed. Stay right here. You can both stay. So they let us both stay in the ICU with him.
That's great.
Around the clock.
That
just
was a
because
blessing.
they knew it was, because we needed each other and he needed us.
Yeah,
and
you didn't need to be separated at that time, trying to deal with such a heavy burden. I mean,
right.
Oh, that would have been so hard.
So it was, and then he did fairly well for a couple of days. The accident, like I said, was early Sunday morning, and then on Tuesday, I noticed him really starting to struggle while he was breathing. He was retracting. He was just having a real hard time. And then Wednesday morning, he went in to respiratory failure and had to be put on a ventilator.
Oh, goodness.
And it was just due to the swelling, because it had gone up, as his injury is at C4, C5, and C3, C4 is your respiratory.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So when the swelling hit that was
it just
when
started blocking everything.
Yes. So then he couldn't breathe. But during this time, from the Monday to Sunday, or Monday to Wednesday, we already had him, which was one of our many other miracles that had taken place. But we had him a room at Shepherd's already.
That is huge.
Yeah. That's
huge.
what they said. Typically it's
You're waiting. Yeah.
At least a month waiting period to get a room. And his accident was on Sunday, and they transported him to Shepherd's on Friday.
Wow. Okay. So that he could go there before he was completely.
Yes. So he went to the ICU at Shepherd's.
Okay.
But yeah, he went to, and that was the whole time, like from the time they brought him in, Jason and I had been asking, our nurses and stuff like that, does anybody know, can somebody get us in touch with the EMS team that worked with Cade? I was like, I would just, love to thank them for getting him here, for, for saving his life, because if it hadn't been for them, he wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
Well, nobody knew, and I was like, it's got to be somewhere. I'm just not asking the right people.
Right.
So on Friday morning, when the EMS team came in to transport Cade, I asked the gentleman that came in, he and the lady, I said, maybe y'all can help us. I said, do y'all have any idea who it was that transported Cade here on Sunday morning? I said, we would, we just want to shake their hands. We want to hug their necks. We want to tell them thank you, because I said, but nobody can tell us who it was. And Chris, the gentleman, he looked at me. He said, baby, he said, do you not know? And I said, do I not know what? And he says, it was us.
Oh.
He said, and when we found out he was being transported, we requested to do the transport because we had brought him in.
That gives me chills.
Well, and everybody in that room was teared up, and like the nurses were like, oh my gosh, I have chills all over my body. And but yeah, so it was them. So we got to speak with them and thank them. And then they transported him to Shepherd's that day. And after they left with him, Jason took me home to start getting
things ready,
to get all mine and Kate's stuff ready for the thing, because we knew to take him there. Our biggest, I guess, the hardest thing about him going there was we knew once I walked in the doors of Shepherd's Spinal Center, I couldn't leave, and nobody else could come in.
Oh, wow.
And so Jason couldn't come. Nobody could come except for, they had what they called the secret garden, and it had like 8-foot wrought iron fence around it, and there was like a 6-foot natural area with shrub and stuff between
it. Yeah.
So, they could come to that fence, but that was as close as you could get.
Yeah.
And we didn't know how long it would be before he would be well enough to even go out to the fence to see him. But so Jason and my parents took me to Shepherd's that Friday. And then, I told them bye. They left, and I was like, I've never been on my own before. I've never, I went straight from
you're
my mom and daddy's
navigating.
house to Jason's house,
Yeah.
and I'm like, and here I'm going into an ICU where, Cade's on a ventilator, he's sedated.
Too much
I'm all
time
alone
to
because
think.
he
Yeah.
can't talk to me. He can't, it's just me, and I have to be the grown up, and I don't like it.
Yeah, yeah. You didn't have anyone telling you what to do or helping you with decisions. I mean, I know you
Exactly.
could call and you could talk through it, but still, I mean, when
Right.
you're there in that moment, sometimes you got to make decisions right then and there,
Yes.
Oh,
And and it started the second I walked in his ICU room because I had a doctor meet me with a pad in his hand, said, I need your signature. We've got to put a chest tube in now. And
oh
I was like,
my.
whoa, excuse me, back up,
Why?
what's going
Yeah,
on?
yeah.
So he got that. He had about 104 temp for 2 days
Mm,
that I had been told,
that was
the
just part of the
ICU doctors and
process.
stuff. They said, well, has a spinal cord injury. He can't regulate his body temperature. This is just part of it. And I was like, but 104 temp,
Something's off.
something's off. Something's wrong. Can y'all check his urine? Can y'all, chest x-ray? Can we do something? So when I walked in, he had a collapsed lung, a pneumothorax, and pneumonia when they checked him when he got to Shepherd's.
Wow.
So they said, if we don't get a chest tube in right now, he won't make it. And I was like, where do I sign and how many places do I,
Yeah,
let's do it.
let's do it.
So they got that, and they were just amazed because, he was on enough sedative medicines to kill a horse,
Oh gosh.
and he was breaking through them. They couldn't
No
keep him
way.
sedated. He would go out for just a couple minutes, but
They'd be right back.
he would be right back. It took them, well, it wasn't until he got out of ICU. It was, I think, February 4th. I actually had a time hop come up the other day on my feed. February 4th, he slept from 10 to 4, and that was the first time he had
It
slept
actually slept. Yeah.
since his accident.
Wow.
So we went about 3 weeks with neither one of us sleeping because he wouldn't sleep, and he wanted me sitting. He wouldn't even let me lay down. I had to be sitting in a chair by his bed,
Right at him.
right at him. And I can remember one day him looking at me and mouthing, because at this point he couldn't speak because of the trach. But I remember him looking at me and saying, Mama, will you hold my hand? And I just looked at him and said, Baby, I am. And, he had no clue, that I was holding his hand. He couldn't feel it. And it was like, oh my gosh. But it was like, and he was like, okay.
Yeah.
So I would have to show him, here I am, I'm holding it.
That's so much for him to think and take in. I mean, all
and
those sensations that he's not able to feel.
And he was so anxious. And Jason would be like, well, doesn't, God's right there. Doesn't he know, he's there. He's going to help him through. And I was like, well, honey, you can say that all you want to, but he can't breathe on and he can't move. I was like, so if it was just one or the other, if like he just couldn't move, but he could breathe, it wouldn't be as bad. Or, he was on a ventilator, but he could move and, get your attention, it wouldn't be as bad. But he has nothing. He can't move or breathe.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I can only imagine how anxious.
Oh yeah, I get anxious over little things, so I can imagine that would be freaking me out. I mean, I wouldn't know, you don't know. You're trying to figure it out, but yet you have, like you said, no feeling. And then he's got all that in his mouth and on him, and he can't express what he's needing to say. That had to be very difficult. Now, how long was he in Shepherd?
So he was in Shepherd's. We got there on, January 29th. And then we left on April the 8th.
Wow. That's a lot of months.
It is. And I remember when he left the ICU to his, he went up to the 5th floor in ICU. And I can remember still to this day, the first nurse we met, his name was Elliot, awesome, big football, big man. And he had been in the police force, he'd been in the military, and so and then and now a nurse, and like I said, he was just big, Man, and he told Cade, he said, all right, Cade, he said, I want to see you move your toe. And Cade just kind of looked at him and he mouthed that he couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
And Elliot looked at him. He was like, excuse me, son, did I ask you if you could move your toe?
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't ask you if you could move your toe. And this is the last time you'll tell me you can't do anything. When I
Wow.
ask you to do something, you'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
He said, because sometimes, he said, with your injury, he said, you may not know you can move your toe. You may be moving it everywhere and have no clue it's
And
doing it
not
because you
knowing
may
that you're
move
doing
it
it.
and not feel it.
Right.
He said, so when I ask you to do something, your job's to do it. I'll tell you if it worked or not.
He put him in his place right then and there.
He did. And from that second on, I was like, this man and I are going to get along. I like him.
He set the standards.
Yes. And if Cade ever got, overly anxious or, got down or whatever, he would get right in his face and let him know, nope, this isn't what you're doing. I'll tell you what you're doing. This is how we're going to do it.
I feel sure that all the people that you're surrounded by became like family. I mean,
they really, really were. There was, and I would like to say, this was a favorite, but I mean, they were all our favorites.
Right.
It was,
right. Each piece had an important part.
They did, and each person ministered to our needs in a different way. There were some that would, we had one of the CNAs that would come in. Her name was Tiffany, and oh my gosh, she would spoil Cade to death as if, he wasn't enough already. But she would come in, she'd give him his bath, and she would give him a massage, and she would just love all over him. Then he had some that would be like, nope, you're getting up, you're doing it,
Right.
It just, but yeah.
So he got a piece of every little bit that he needed at the time.
He did, yes. There was some that would, sit at night and hold his hand all night long and not move. And there were some that were like, nope, you're going to sleep, your mama's going to sleep, and you're going to do this.
Right.
Just what we needed when we needed it.
And what did it feel like the day that they said, Kate can go home?
That was the absolute scariest moment I think I've ever had. We had the date. They had put the date up probably the beginning of March. With April 8th was going to be his go home date. So we had it on there and we knew. But he and I both cried. We cried to the doctors. We cried to the nurses. We're like, no, there's no way we can't do this.
Right.
When we were leaving to go home, it was just like, are y'all sure? No.
It feels weird. It feels wrong.
Well, I was like, I can't do it. I can't do this. They're like,
yeah.
You've done it for 3 months. You've done it here, but you've done it. I'm like, yeah, but I had y'all.
Right. Oh, you were just right around the corner. I just had to holler or push a button.
yeah, we're just around the corner, and there was alarms going off. If he quit breathing and I was having to bag in, I knew that somebody else was going to be in there in about 2.2 seconds to take over, and y'all were going to bag him for me, and I could stop. There was always somebody right here, and y'all weren't going to be right there when I go home. It's going to be all me, and I can't do that. And he was scared to go home too, but it was exciting at the same time because
get to be back with family and some type of normalcy, if you could call it that.
And I think he had in his mind, we were going to come home and, friends were going to come over and they were going to get to do all this stuff. And, we got home and his friends had jobs and school and lives, and he was paralyzed. And he couldn't move. And he hit rock bottom probably about 2 weeks after we got home. He screamed, he cried, he fussed, he cussed, and
Stuff he'd been holding in. I mean, I'm sure.
And so I left him sitting there, and I went to the bedroom, closed the door, and did the same. I was like, I can't do this, God. I don't know,
What am I supposed to do here?
How I can't deal with that. He's sitting here saying he don't want to live. He's sitting here saying get something now. He's sitting, where do we go from here? How do we do this? We can't.
Did you have to change all the dynamics of your home to get him in there? And
not all. We did. We had to redo our bathroom because we didn't have a bathroom that he could get into. Of course, we had to have a ramp built. But we had Long Construction came out and did an amazing job getting any doors that he had to get through, getting ramps, getting doors widened, and
Yeah.
getting a bathroom done that he could
You could
get
take him
into.
in.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it was about 3 months before he actually, once we got home, it was about 2.5, 3 months before he was actually able to get a shower. But
Right. Right.
he was finally able to, and that's been amazing.
Mm,
But
definitely.
yeah, I can remember, Cade told me one day once he flipped the switch. It was just like, he went from, this is not a life I want to live and I don't want to live it,
Mm-hmm.
to, you know what, I can sit here and I can be depressed and I can mope and I can say life's not worth living, or I can work to get better,
Mm-hmm.
and I can live the life that God's intended and get better. He says, me laying around feeling sorry for myself isn't going to
Isn't
do
changing
anything.
anything. Right. Right.
And but yeah, and he says I was, running so hard and so fast from God, he had to sit me down and shut me up
Mm,
to get me to listen.
mm.
And that's exactly what he's done. And he said, so I'm ready to listen.
Yeah,
Um,
that's something. That is something. That's got to be deep for all of
yeah,
you because now you're going through all the rehab. I know
yes.
that keeps you quite busy. How often during the week do you have to go out and do all that?
So he does physical therapy 2 to 3 times a week
Mm.
for an hour each visit, and then he does occupational therapy twice a week for an hour each visit. So
So pretty much every
um,
day.
what we do, it's 3 days a week
Oh,
because they
okay.
put his occupational and physical therapy on the same
Oh,
days.
that's good.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so we
Yeah.
just have to go out for that 2 to 3 days a week. And he has an amazing occupational therapist and physical therapist. They're both phenomenal.
Awesome.
Um, and his physical therapist is actually like he's taken him to concerts. He's taken him to ball games.
Oh,
He'll does stuff out of the house too, just to get
to
him
get him
out. And
out and that
uh,
another environment. Yeah.
right, right. He's planning on taking him out. On his birthday's in March, and he's gonna.
Oh,
Cade's a huge anime Japanese
yes. Yes.
stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
so he's taking him to Atlanta to do some kind of. They're gonna eat at like 3 Japanese restaurants
Oh,
and
how
kind
cool.
of
That'll be
do
fun.
all kinds of
When is
do
his
all kinds.
birthday in March?
March 27th.
Okay, mine's the second. That's neat. Well, I know that this has been a journey for your family. Now, a little bit more real quick, and I was going to ask, how have the brothers, how have they done? How has that all meshed together in bringing Kate home, and now everything has changed, and of course, I know you have had to put a lot more attention towards him. How have they done with all that?
So they have been absolutely amazing.
Mm,
Um, they both held a little bit of guilt. Casey, especially, he has dealt a whole lot more, as far as emotionally. Caleb holds stuff in, so if
mm-hmm,
he's having a hard time, he doesn't really tell us.
mm.
Um, but Caleb and Casey both knew that he was leaving that night.
Okay, so they
He
just
had
feel
told them.
guilty. Mm,
So they felt guilty because they knew.
mm.
And if they had told us, would it have changed? And it's like,
No, probably not.
probably not.
No.
Probably not.
Yeah, he's going to go
Um,
eventually. He did it anyway, so
right,
mm,
right. And it's like, if y'all had told us, if we tried to stop him,
he'd still
who
go.
knows what,
Mm,
yeah, there's no telling what would have happened. But I mean, from day one, we got home and they jumped in and was like, how can we help? What can we do?
oh, that's
Teach us the
precious.
transfers, teach
Mm-hmm.
us so they are like my number one go-tos. If I need to go out
Yeah,
and do something,
yeah.
they are amazing. They can do anything he needs done. Um, they don't do the shower, but I mean that's basically all they don't do
Mm,
is showers. They know how to do everything else, and they
that's a
just,
blessing.
if Cade needs it, they're right there. And actually, the first, God, probably 6 months to a year that Cade was home, one of them slept with him every night.
Oh, just
So
to keep him.
when he was in his hospital bed, they pulled up a blow up mattress, and one of them would sleep. At first, both of them did, and then they got to where, okay, they they took turns so that
Mm-hmm.
one of them could sleep in their bed and sleep a little bit,
Yeah, sleep on better.
longer.
Yeah.
But for the first year he was home, one of them slept with him
Mm.
every single night, just because he was kind of worried to be by himself, and they didn't
Right.
want him to be by
They didn't
himself.
want him to be, and they knew you needed some rest.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so, and I mean, they not complained the first time. If Cade needs something, if he needs to be fed, they're up fixing it. Getting it. They're just, and his friends have been amazing too.
Oh.
I'll come in, and there's been times where, I'll go to fix him something, and he'll have a friend that, no, April, Mom, April, you go sit down. You need to rest. I'll feed him. I got
Oh.
this. So,
That's so good. That's so good. I'm glad he's got that community around him. And of course, church. I see that he's back in church and he's going and being faithful with that again. And that's so good. Um,
yes. And he's told me, since then, he's like, how on earth did I ever think these people didn't love me? He
because he
said
was in his
they,
sin. He couldn't see it.
yes.
Right.
Yeah. And that's why
Right.
it's like, you couldn't see it. You couldn't see
You
the
were
forest
blinded by the
for the
anger and
trees.
yeah,
Huh?
trying to find,
I was,
improve something.
yeah. I was
Yeah.
like, the enemy
Hot
had you
and
where he
heavy.
wanted you, and
Mm-hmm.
he wasn't going to let you get, you know, any
Away from it.
closer.
Mm.
Um, and that's what, and we've had, after Kate had been home for just a few months, we were out to eat with him one night, and
Mm-hmm.
at the steakhouse in Rockmart.
Mm-hmm.
And Jason and Caleb and Kason took Cade to the car, and I went to pay. And I had a gentleman, he walked up to me. He was like, "Excuse me, ma'am." He said, "But are you here with your family?" And I was like, "Well,
Yeah.
yeah."
Why?
Yeah. And I was like, "What?" And he says, "Well," he says, I'm really nervous. I've never done this before." And I was like, What do you mean? Oh, you've never done what?" And he says, I'm sorry. He's your son. Is that your son in the wheelchair that was here with you?
Mm.
I said, "Yes, that's my son." He said, "Okay, then you're who I need to talk to." He said, "God wouldn't let me take a bite of my food until I came over here to tell you that He is a God of impossibilities, that it doesn't matter what any doctor, nurse, therapist, anybody has told you Him and regarding His situation." He said, "He is a God of possibilities. He is
Mm.
a God of miracles, and He wants you to remember this moment when your son walks out of that chair, he's not staying there."
Mm. I got tears in
And
my eyes. I mean, that is just like, oh, and chills. Mm.
yeah, and it was just like, "I'm sorry, who did you say you were?" And because, I mean,
Yeah.
this man had no
No
clue who we
clue.
were,
Yeah. And
and
you didn't
he
know
didn't
him.
know. Yeah, and he had no clue if Kate had. I mean, he could have been born
Mm-hmm.
that way. He didn't
Mm-hmm.
know that it was an accident. He
Mm-hmm.
didn't have a clue what had happened. All he knew was, "Hey, God said this, and go tell her."
Mm.
Um,
Wow.
and I feel like we've had so many instances happen, and I even, before the accident ever happened, before Kate ever even started going off on his tangents and being a
Mm-hmm.
teenager,
Mm-hmm.
um, my mom's mother, um, we knew that she was close to death. She was, you know, within days.
Mm-hmm.
They had told us, a week tops, and she had told them, she was like, "I need to talk to April." She said, "I need to talk to April. Where's April?"
Mm.
So they came and got me, and she told me, and it was in June of 2018, and his accident wasn't till January of 2021.
Right.
But she told me, she said, and like, she had been in and out,
Mm-hmm.
and had told us about, she'd seen angels, and she'd seen this, and she'd seen that,
Mm-hmm.
and we had asked her at one point, like, "Mama, I'll come up, just go on to Jesus." And she said,
Mm-hmm.
"I can't
Right.
yet. It's not my turn." And we're like, "What do you mean it's not your turn? Are you in line?"
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
what are you waiting
What are you
on?
doing?
Yeah. And she told me, she called me in there, and she says, "Baby," she said, "I've just got a message for you." And I was like, "Well, okay." And she said, "This is going to be hard." She said, "This is where it gets hard."
Mm.
And she said, "Cage turned 16. She said, "You've handed him a set of keys." And she said, "This is where parenting gets the best of you." She said,
Mm-hmm.
"This is when it doesn't matter what you've taught them. This is when they get to make their own choices."
Right.
She said, "You just have to stay close to God." She says, "Keep praying." She said, because Cade's going to make his own choices. She said he may choose to drink, he may choose drugs, he may choose, there's no telling, what he can choose. And she said, but she said, God wants you to know he's going to be okay, that it's about to get hard, that he's going to be okay. And,
Whew.
And he was going through, he'd just had a breakup at the time. And so, and we were kind of worried about that because he was being so dramatic over the breakup.
Right.
And so I thought, well, okay, well, maybe she's talking
That's
about
it.
this.
Yeah. Girlfriends. No big deal.
Yes. And then he started drinking some. It's like, this is what she was talking about. This is what she was talking about.
The choices he's making.
The choices he's making. And then after the accident, it just hit me one day. I was like, I was just laying, and it just came. She flashed before in that conversation, and I was like,
"This is what you're talking about.
This is what she was talking about. This is what's going to be hard." But God told me 3 years before this accident ever happened that he's going to be okay.
He's going to be okay.
So,
that's
and
beautiful.
He has sent, and he sent multiple people, strangers. I mean, it just feels like when we get to our lowest, when we're like, okay, God, you've told us that you're waiting to work a miracle. You've sent me. I mean, my mom has always dreamed and had visions and stuff that typically comes to pass.
Right.
And she has seen Cade walking with braces. While he was still in ICU, there was one night I had a dream that I came home from work and Cade was out in our front yard push mowing the grass. And when I pulled up, he pushed the mower over to me and he let go and he ran to me. It was a very awkward, funny run, but he ran to me, threw his arms around me, and he says, "Mama, don't worry. God's got this. He's going to heal me." And then, and like I said, then we've had, like I said, strangers. The Stranger in Steakhouse. We were at Bonefish Grill in Chattanooga one time, and there was one of the waiters came up to Jason and said, "Can I ask you what happened to your son?" And he said, he said, "When y'all came in, God told me you've got to talk to them." He says, "Let them know." He says, "I'm going to heal him. I've got big plans for him. He's not
done
I've got
yet.
plans. I'm not done."
Yeah.
And it just seems like when we get to our lowest low and we're sitting here going, "God, have you forgot? Hey, God, we're still down here."
Right. Someone it comes in and reminds you he's still working.
Like,
he's still
working. I'm not done. And, I don't know what he's waiting on. We can see huge changes in Cade, in his mindset, his thought process, he's holding on to God. He asked me, we were actually still in the hospital one day, and he asked me, he said, "Mom," he said, "do you really think God would have sent an 18-year-old boy to hell? Like, if I had died that night, do you think he would have sent me to hell?" And I just looked at Cade and I said, "Absolutely not, Cade." I said, "God sent his son to die for you."
Right.
And I can tell you right now, there is no way in the world I would ever allow you to die for anybody else. I said, "There's no way."
Right.
I said, "He sent his son to save you. If you had gone to hell, you would have sent yourself."
Exactly. Amen. I love that. That was very well said. That is so good.
And he was just, and he just looked at me and was like, "Oh my gosh."
Yeah.
And
it was decisions he was making. So if there was one thing that you could share with a family member that may be waking up to that call tomorrow morning, what would it be that you'd want to say to them?
It's hard. It's, I wish there was such, that I could say it's hard, but it's going to get easier. But, basically some days are hard, some days are harder, but you still live.
And your faith.
Your child is still going to live, and God is still there through it all.
Lean on him more.
Yes, absolutely. He was there with me from the start to the end when, the weeks I was there in the hospital where all Cade could, do was lay there and be still.
Right.
God was the one that held me through it. He was the one. I would pray. I would ask him questions. I'd be like, "Okay, well, what about this? What about that?" I can remember one night, thinking Cade was still in ICU. And I was praying. I was like, God, what's taking so long? I mean, this is 2 weeks into it, and I want to know what's taking so long. Here we're 2 years, But I was like, God, what is taking so long? What is, why? And I went to sleep, and I woke up singing Karen's Peck 4 days late. I had not sang that song or heard that song. I had not heard it in years,
forever.
probably.
Yeah.
And I woke up in the middle of the night singing it verbally out loud.
That's something.
And I was like, okay,
I'm trusting you.
You're on time. And I can't tell you how many times that I would pray, and I would wake up in the middle of the night singing the answer to my song. And it was song, most of the time, stuff that I had not heard in a long time. I know my poppy, he died of lung cancer when the boys were, let's say, Kason was 2. So 13 years ago. But his song was "God Said You're Gonna Make It." He would go to the house singing it all the time. I mean, it was, and so that was just kind of our family theme song. We'd see Poppy and we'd sing "God Said You're Gonna Make It." And there was, I can't tell you how many times when Cade was laying in the bed or in his chair or whatever, he was like, Mama, God said you're gonna make it. Sing it to me. And so, we'd sing "God Said You're Gonna Make It" right there in the hospital room.
He knows what to give you in the time you need it.
He does. He knows exactly what you need, and it didn't matter. There was one night, I think it was a custodian that came into the room, and she took one look at Cade and was like, "The spirit that is in this room is absolutely amazing. Tell me a little bit about yourself." She's like, God's got something He's going to do with you, kid. She's like, "There's something here."
Yeah, He's not done. No, definitely not done yet. I think that's the thing we have to learn is patience and keeping our faith in Him through the process. And again, knowing that He's bringing you through this. April, I thank you for sharing your story today. I know that it's not been easy. It may not still be easy in days to come, ups and downs. Like you said, there's hard and there's harder. But you have a family that loves you and that's with you in this, and you have a community, your church. And I think that's so strong. When you have that, you're able to bear things easier. But I just want to thank you, and I appreciate you taking the time today to share your story.
Well, thank you for listening.
Thank you for joining my podcast today. We all have a story to share. Each story has purpose and makes an impact to you, the listener, creating a journey with passion and purpose. The journey we're taking is the journey within you. Please share with others and subscribe below.